At my son's birthday party, my daughter-in-law called me a burden in front of all the guests because I lived in their house and my son took care of me. The guests awkwardly chuckled, but what Michael did next took me by surprise. Eleonora slowly turned on the bed, wincing from the pain in her left side. A year had passed since the stroke, yet her body still treacherously refused to cooperate, no matter how diligently she performed the exercises her doctor had prescribed. She listened closely to the sounds in the house. Something clattered downstairs, probably Christina already in the kitchen. Eleonora sighed and reached for the nightstand to get her pills. The morning pill box was empty. Again. "Strange," she whispered, though she knew perfectly well there was nothing strange about it. Her daughter-in-law had forgotten to refill it last night, just as she had forgotten 3 times already this week. Eleonora struggled to sit up and reached for her walker. It wasn't in its usual place. Of course not. Christina had probably once again, accidentally, left it in the hallway, ensuring her mother-in-law couldn't come downstairs on her own. "Grandma?" A soft whisper and a cautious knock on the door made her smile. "Come in, Ethan." The door opened slightly, and Ethan slipped into the room, a skinny, freckled boy with his grandfather's eyes. At least something of James still remained in this world. "I brought your walker. Mom said it was in the way in the hallway," he said, helping his grandmother up. "Thank you, sweetheart. You're always my little rescuer," she said, stroking his hair, trying not to show how much these daily accidents hurt. And here, Ethan pulled a small packet of pills from his pajama pocket. "I saw Mom put them in the cupboard yesterday and tell Dad you probably forgot to take them." Eleonora pressed her lips together. She never forgot her medication. Never. It was Christina who made her life harder and then complained to Michael about the scatterbrained old lady. "Did you have breakfast?" she asked, slowly moving toward the door. "Yeah, Mom made pancakes," Ethan said, casting a guilty glance at his grandmother. "But she said you get oatmeal, because you can't have greasy food." Eleonora nodded. Of course, oatmeal again. Even on days when the doctor said a little treat was fine. Christina had turned healthy eating into another form of punishment. Going downstairs took almost 15 minutes. Christina, a slim blonde with perfect makeup even on a Saturday morning, didn't offer to help, though she passed by several times. "Good morning," Eleonora finally said when she reached the kitchen. "Oh, awake at last. It's nearly noon," Christina said without even turning around. "Your porridge is on the table, probably cold by now." Eleonora looked at the gray mush in a small bowl. She had asked for it without milk. Milk upset her stomach, but Christina always forgot that too. "Where is everyone?" she asked as she carefully sat down. "Michael's in the garage with the car. Ethan's out back. The family's living their life, you know, unlike some who only sleep and eat." Christina clanged the dishes loudly. Eleonora stayed silent, slowly stirring her cold porridge. She used to answer such jabs, tried to defend herself, reminded them of her 30 years teaching, of the hundreds of students she had taught, of the book on English poetry she had written. But Christina always shot back. "That was the past. Now you're just a burden." "Don't forget, you'll be eating in the kitchen today. We have guests coming tonight." Christina accidentally bumped Eleonora's glass, spilling water onto her robe. "Oh, sorry. You're so clumsy." Eleonora silently dabbed at the robe with a paper napkin. Michael never saw these daily humiliations. He worked long hours building his business and came home tired and distracted. Christina turned into the perfect wife the moment he walked in the door. Once, Eleonora tried to tell her son. It was after her daughter-in-law accidentally threw away a photo of James, claiming she mistook it for trash. Michael listened and sighed. "Mom, you're exaggerating." "Christina is really trying. You just need to adjust to life in our family." After that, Eleonora stayed quiet. She saw how exhausted her son was, how torn he was between work and home. She understood Christina manipulated him, painting her as a fussy, ungrateful old woman. But what could she do? Where could she go? On her modest pension, she could barely afford a room in a rundown neighborhood with no elevator, which, with her walker, would mean a life sentence in 4 walls. "Grandma," Ethan peeked into the kitchen, "want to see how I learned to throw the ball?" "Ethan," Christina snapped, "Grandma is busy and she can't be in the sun with her blood pressure." But Dr. Morgan said fresh air. "Go to your room and do your homework." Christina's eyes flashed. "And don't argue with me." Ethan cast a guilty glance at his grandmother and left. Eleonora sat with her head down. That little boy was her only joy in the house. He secretly brought her books from the library, shared his candy, told her school stories. Christina did everything to limit their time together. "Wash your dishes and go upstairs," the daughter-in-law said pointedly, glancing at the clock. "I need to get the house ready for guests." "What guests?" Eleonora asked cautiously. "None of your business," Christina snapped, but a second later softened, apparently deciding to brag. "It's Michael's birthday next week. Today we're discussing the party. I've already ordered the cake and entertainment, so don't get any bright ideas like last time." Eleanor remembered when she had suggested a literary quiz for her grandson. Christina had mocked her in front of Michael, saying, "Only some crazy old bat would suggest something so boring for a kid's party." "I'll try not to be in the way," Eleonora said quietly, getting up with her walker. "And wear that gray sweater I got you," Christina called after her. "That blue one looks like a rag." Eleonora slowly climbed the stairs, each step echoing with pain, not just in her body, but in her soul. The rag was a sweater James had given her for their last Christmas together. She had never told anyone, not even Michael. Reaching her room, she collapsed onto the bed and pulled a small notebook from under the pillow. April 26th, same as always, Christina hid the pills. She began to write with a trembling hand. These notes were her only way to stay sane, proof that she wasn't imagining her daughter-in-law's cruelty. By lunchtime, Eleonora sat in a small chair by her bedroom window, trying to read a tattered old volume of Dickens when she heard Christina's voice in the garden. The tone was low, firm, and completely unlike the one Eleonora heard in the house. "No, I said I've got everything under control," Christina hissed. "Give me a couple more weeks. The paperwork is almost ready." Eleonora froze, afraid to move. Christina let out a nervous laugh. Nothing like the charming one she used around Michael and his friends. "Don't be an idiot, Alex. You'll get your cut once everything's signed." "Alex?" Eleonora ran through the names of everyone the family knew. There was no Alex. For the past 6 months, Eleonora had noticed many odd things in Christina's behavior. She often went out shopping or to the beautician, returning without a single bag or any visible change. When Michael asked, she scoffed, "You don't expect me to account for every dollar I spend, do you?" He would just shrug and go back to his work. One night at dinner, Ethan asked his mom about her grandfather for a school project on family history. "He was an architect," Christina said, serving salad. "Designed buildings in Boston." Eleonora frowned. A few months ago, when a neighbor admired Christina's antique silver ring, she had said it was a keepsake from her grandfather, the jeweler, from Philadelphia. And last Christmas, at a dinner with Michael's colleagues, she'd tearfully reminisced about her grandfather, the violinist who fled the country after the Revolution. Christina had a remarkable ability to tailor her biography to suit the moment. Once, Eleonora tried to share this observation with her son, but he waved it off. "Mom, you're nitpicking again. Christina's just an impulsive, creative soul. She embellishes stories sometimes to make them more interesting. Everyone does that." What troubled Eleonora most was that twice, strangers had come to their house asking for someone named Anna. The first time, it was a tall man with a slight accent whom Eleonora mistook for a courier. "Is Anna home?" he asked without so much as a greeting. "There's no Anna here," Eleonora replied. "You must have the wrong address." The man frowned, checked the house number, and looked at her closely. "Are you sure? Anna Lewinsky?" "This is the Norton residence," Eleonora said firmly. "No one named Lewinsky lives here." The man shrugged and left, but a week later, a young woman in a business suit rang the doorbell with the same question. Eleonora only shook her head, but something about the woman's insistence made her uneasy. That evening, Christina paced nervously around the house, checking the locks twice. The next day, she suddenly suggested to Michael that they install a modern home security system with video surveillance. 2 weeks before Michael's birthday, the house grew more and more hectic. At breakfast, Christina made an announcement. "This year, we're throwing a grand celebration," she said, pacing around the kitchen with a cup of coffee. 42 is a significant age. It needs to be remembered by everyone in town. Eleonora quietly stirred her oatmeal. Her son's birthday had always been special to her. Before her illness, she used to bake his favorite Napoleon cake, using a recipe passed down from her grandmother in Europe. Michael always said, "No one made it better." "I've made a guest list," Christina continued, scrolling through her phone. 50 people, not counting us. Only the most important business partners and influential people in town. "What about Michael's old friends?" Eleonora asked gently. "John and Martin from college?" Christina pursed her lips. "The bartender and the school teacher? Seriously, we're inviting people who matter for Michael's business, not losers from the past." Eleonora lowered her gaze. She remembered how those losers had helped Michael through hard times, how John had loaned him money for his first office rent, and how Martin had looked after little Ethan when Christina was off at yet another spa retreat. "I could help with the preparations," Eleonora offered a few days later when she saw Christina laying out fabric samples for the tablecloths. "I used to organize all of Michael's parties." Christina shot her a cold look. "Thanks, but we've already hired a professional planner. This will be an elegant, adult soiree, not a kid's birthday with balloons and a homemade cake." Despite the hurtful remark, Eleonora didn't give up. The next day, she got up earlier than usual and went to the kitchen to bake a pie. Not a cake, which she no longer had the strength for, but an apple pie Michael also loved. The work was slow. Her post-stroke hands didn't cooperate well, but Eleonora stubbornly kneaded the dough, pausing occasionally to rest against her walker. When Christina walked into the kitchen, the pie was already in the oven and the counters were spotless. "What's that?" Christina sniffed the air. "Are you baking?" "Apple pie for Michael," Eleonora said proudly. "His favorite." "Used to be his favorite," Christina emphasized. "Michael's been watching his diet for a year, no flour. Besides, we've ordered dessert from a French pastry chef." She walked over and turned off the oven. "But it needs 10 more minutes." "Look," Christina crossed her arms. "I get that you want to be helpful, but just stay out of the way, okay? Everything's under control." Later, the half-baked pie vanished from the oven. Eleonora didn't ask where it went. In her room, she took out an old box of photographs. If she wasn't allowed to help with the party, she could at least make a special gift for her son, a family album filled with stories and old photos he might have forgotten or never seen. Photos of his father in his youth, their wedding pictures, Michael's first steps, his school achievements. It was difficult work. Her hands trembled, her eyes watered, but she diligently labeled each picture, adding a brief story. She had to hide the album every time she heard Christina's footsteps. Somehow, Eleonora was certain her daughter-in-law would find a way to ruin even this. 3 days before the party, boxes of decorations and tableware were delivered to the house. Eleonora sat in the corner of the living room with her knitting, the only activity she was allowed in shared spaces. "Put the vase on that table," Christina instructed the decorators. "No, a little to the left." Eleonora froze. It was the Nortons vase, a treasured heirloom passed down through generations. Blue porcelain with hand-painted designs, carefully preserved by her mother-in-law and given to her and Michael before her passing. "Christina," Eleonora said softly, "that vase is very fragile. Maybe it would be safer in Michael's study, away from the guests?" "It belongs in plain view," Christina snapped. "It shows the family's status. Valuable things should be seen." Eleonora bit her lip. That kind of treatment of a family relic felt sacrilegious, but she said nothing. Lately, silence had become her default response. That evening, disaster struck. Eleonora was slowly crossing the living room with her walker. She didn't notice that one of its legs caught on the cord from a new floor lamp. Losing balance, she instinctively reached for the nearest table, the very one with the Norton's vase. A deafening crash of shattered porcelain echoed through the house. Eleonora stared in horror at the fragments of blue china scattered across the floor. "What happened?" Christina stormed into the room. Seeing the shattered vase, she froze, then her face contorted with rage. "What have you done?" I didn't mean to," Eleonora stammered helplessly. "I lost my balance." "You destroyed a family heirloom," Christina screamed so loudly that Ethan came running in from the kitchen. "That vase was worth thousands. It had been in the family for generations." "I know," Eleonora whispered as tears streamed down her cheeks. "I know better than anyone. James's mother gave it to us." "And how am I supposed to explain this to Michael?" Christina threw her hands up theatrically. "Once again, you've ruined everything." Ethan quietly walked up and took his grandmother's hand. "It's my fault," he said suddenly. "I left the lamp cord on the floor. Grandma tripped because of me." Christina looked at her son, then back at Eleonora. "It doesn't matter who's to blame. What matters is the loss. Michael will be furious." Just then, the doorbell rang. Still fuming, Christina went to answer it. Eleonora, trembling, sank into an armchair. Ethan was quietly gathering the fragments of the vase into a box. "Don't throw it away," she whispered to her grandson. "Maybe it can still be mended." Voices drifted in from the hallway. Christina was speaking to a man Eleonora didn't recognize. "Come in," Christina's voice instantly changed. Calm, professional, and composed. "The documents are in my office." Eleonora heard them walk past the living room and into Michael's home office. The door closed but didn't shut completely, and Eleonora caught snippets of the conversation. Signatures on the contracts, share package, confidential. She didn't pay much attention at first, still consumed by the broken vase. But then Christina's loud voice pierced the air. "After all these years, he'll finally get what he deserves." Christina clearly wasn't moderating her volume, likely thinking Eleonora was in another part of the house. "The company will be ours, and nothing will remain of his legacy." A man's voice replied, lower, more measured, but Eleonora managed to catch fragments. "Father, prison, suicide." "After the party, we settle this for good," Christina said. "I've waited long enough for this moment." Eleonora froze. Who was Christina talking about? Whose legacy was supposed to disappear? She wanted to move closer to the office door, but just then, Ethan burst into the room. "Mom, I can fix the vase. I have special glue for ceramics." The conversation in the office stopped abruptly. "Ethan, don't come in without knocking," Christina snapped, and the door was firmly shut. Eleonora remained in the living room, troubled by what she had overheard. Suspicion crept into her heart. The company, the legacy, the father. Christina was clearly plotting something connected to Michael's business, but what exactly? And what did it have to do with his birthday? What unsettled Eleonora even more was how different Christina seemed when she exited the office half an hour later, having seen the guest off. Usually cold and distant with Eleonora, this time she was almost courteous. "Don't worry about the vase," she said. "These old things, their time has passed. We need to leave the past behind." But in her eyes, Eleonora saw something strange, not anger, but a kind of triumph. And that frightened her more than the usual contempt or mockery. That evening, when Michael came home from work, Christina made a theatrical show of the broken vase. "Unfortunately, your mother broke the family heirloom today," she said with feigned regret. "But I told her it's all right. After all, there's so much ahead of us. Why cling to the past?" Michael just sighed and kissed his mother's forehead. "Don't worry, Mom. It's just an object." Eleonora didn't dare tell her son about what she'd overheard. Maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe she was reading too much into things. And besides, Michael looked so tired. That night, she couldn't sleep. Something was going to happen at the party. something tied to Michael's business and perhaps even to his father. But what exactly, she could only guess. Michael's birthday began in a flurry of activity. Eleanor awoke to the sounds of a bustling downstairs. Catering staff had arrived. Florists were arranging centerpieces. Someone was giving orders about where to place extra tables. Eleanor slowly got up. For this special day, she had set aside her best dress, a dark blue one with tiny silver sparkles that she had last worn for her husband's final birthday 5 years ago. It now hung loosely on her thin frame, emphasizing how much weight she'd lost after the stroke. But she had nothing else more suitable. Going downstairs took twice as long as usual. Boxes cluttered the stairs, and she had to maneuver her walker carefully. When she finally reached the ground floor, Christina, in a tight-fitting burgundy dress, gave her a critical once-over. "You're planning to wear that?" she asked, pointing at Eleanor's dress. "It looks like a shroud." "It's all I have," Eleanor replied quietly. Christina rolled her eyes but said nothing more. Someone had just asked her about glass placement. By 3 o'clock, the house was unrecognizable. Eleanor couldn't remember it ever being this full. It felt like Christina had invited half the city, Michael's business partners in tailored suits, their elegant wives, even a few local celebrities Eleanor recognized from newspapers. She quietly settled into a corner armchair in the living room where she could watch the party unfold while staying out of the spotlight. Glasses clinked, laughter rang out, and Michael, handsome in a new suit, greeted everyone with a smile. But Eleanor could see that the smile never quite reached his eyes. He looked tense, like a man at a business summit, not a birthday celebration. Christina floated between guests, exuding charm. She played the perfect hostess, topping off champagne, introducing people, laughing at every joke, no matter how flat. In her burgundy dress, she looked stunning. Eleanor had to admit Christina knew how to make an impression. "Grandma," Ethan appeared beside her, unusually groomed and in a stiff starched shirt. "Want some juice? I brought you orange." "Thank you, sweetheart." Eleanor accepted the glass gratefully. "You look so handsome today." "Mom made me wear this dumb shirt," the boy grimaced. "Says it's important for Dad's business." Eleanor was about to reply when Christina swept over to them. "Ethan, I told you to speak with Mr. Stein. He wants to meet you," she snapped, tugging his shoulder, casting a disapproving look at Eleanor. "And I've arranged a seat for you at the far table for dinner," she added to her mother-in-law. "It'll be quieter there." Which meant out of sight, so she wouldn't embarrass the guests. Eleanor nodded. She was used to such considerate instructions by now. The formal part of the celebration went off without a hitch. Toasts, congratulations, the giving of presents, all orchestrated perfectly by Christina. Eleanor contributed her gift, the photo album. Michael was visibly moved and spent a long time flipping through the pages, remembering his childhood. When the formal dinner ended, guests drifted through the house and garden. Some danced to the music, others broke into groups for casual conversation. Michael was surrounded by business partners. Christina flirted with a tall man by the bar. Eleanor, feeling tired from the noise, decided to retreat briefly to her room. On her way, she noticed Michael's office door ajar. Inside, an open briefcase lay on the desk, filled with company folders. Nothing unusual, just papers with the logo of Michael's firm. But one document caught her eye. It bore the name Robert Davidson, the same name she had overheard in Christina's conversation with the mysterious Mr. Gray. Curiosity got the better of her. Eleanor glanced around, no one nearby, and carefully picked up the document. It was a transfer agreement for a significant share package of Michael's company to some offshore entity. Michael's signature was at the bottom, but it looked off, as though someone had tried to imitate his handwriting. "What do you think you're doing?" Christina's icy voice made Eleanor jump and drop the paper. I was just," she stammered, caught in the act. "You're spying on us?" Christina snatched the paper off the floor. "Rummaging through Michael's documents?" No, I just saw a name and… What name? Christina's eyes narrowed. What do you know? Eleonora steadied herself. I heard you speaking with Mr. Gray about a Davidson, about revenge. What are you planning, Christina? Christina's face twisted with fury and fear. You were eavesdropping! She grabbed Eleonora's wrist so tightly the older woman cried out. How dare you meddle in things that aren't your business? I won't let you hurt Michael, Eleonora said firmly. Whatever you're planning. You don't know anything. Christina raised her voice. You don't understand. This is none of your business. Their argument was drawing attention. Several guests gathered near the office door, watching the scene with growing curiosity. Christina noticed them and suddenly smiled. A strange, forced smile. I'm terribly sorry for this scene, she said to the guests. My mother-in-law unfortunately sometimes imagines strange things. Side effects of her stroke, you understand. I'm not imagining anything, Eleonora protested. You're planning to deceive Michael. I saw the forged signature on the document. The crowd began whispering. Michael appeared, worry etched on his face as he looked between his mother and his wife. What's going on? He asked. Christina let out a theatrical sigh. Your mother is accusing me of some kind of conspiracy, darling. Says I'm forging your signature. She went through your briefcase and is now spinning some wild story. Michael turned to his mother, confusion and hurt in his eyes. Mom, were you really looking through my papers? Eleonora felt the floor slipping from beneath her feet. She hadn't expected Christina to turn the situation so cleverly. Michael, I only glanced. I saw something suspicious. Please believe me. Suspicious? Christina's eyes suddenly welled with tears. You see, she never misses a chance to slander me. Even on your birthday, she's trying to ruin everything. Michael looked overwhelmed, caught between two sides, unsure who to believe. Maybe you should go lie down for a while, Mom, he said gently. You're tired. I'm not tired. Eleonora's voice shook. She felt the moment slipping away. Michael, your wife is planning something. I heard her talking about revenge, about something happening after your birthday. Enough, Christina exploded, her face twisted with rage. I've tolerated you for a whole year. Your moods, your complaints, your manipulation. You're trying to turn my husband against me? It won't work. Eleonora stared at her daughter-in-law, stunned. Christina had never lost control in public before. You know what? Christina went on, ignoring the crowd of guests now frozen in stunned silence. Let's say it plainly. We support his mother, a burden to our marriage, to our son, to our entire life. A heavy, shocked silence fell over the room. Someone gave a nervous chuckle, unsure how to react. Look at her, Christina pointed at Eleonora. Pretends to be helpless, but she's really spying, scheming, manipulating. This "I accidentally saw the document" story is just another ploy to turn Michael against me. Eleonora felt the blood drain from her face. The room swirled around her. Public humiliation in front of dozens of people. She wanted the ground to swallow her. She didn't dare lift her eyes, but she felt the stares, pitying, curious, uncomfortable. Somewhere in the crowd, Ethan stood frozen, his eyes wide with horror. Eleonora wanted to say something, to defend herself, but no words came. She had become the helpless old woman Christina always claimed she was. God, give me the strength to survive this shame, she thought, fighting back the tears. Just don't let me cry in front of them. Please. Suddenly, a chair scraped loudly. Michael stepped forward, his face pale as chalk. All eyes turned to him. Eleonora braced herself, expecting him to try and diffuse the situation, to smooth things over, to turn it all into a joke. But instead, Michael walked over to his mother and took her hands in his. Mom, he said loudly for everyone to hear, you've never been, and will never be, a burden. You are the most important person in my life. Eleonora looked up at her son in disbelief. His eyes were wet with tears, but his voice was steady. Everything I have, everything I've achieved, I owe to you, Michael continued. and I will no longer let anyone humiliate you. No one." Christina stood frozen, her face contorted in shock and rage. After the shocking confrontation, an oppressive silence settled over the room. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to react to the unexpected family drama that had unfolded before them. One by one, they began murmuring hasty goodbyes and slipping out the door. "Andrew, we should go. We have an early morning," a polished blonde whispered to her husband. "Yes, of course. Michael, thank you for the evening. Happy birthday," the man mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Eleonora's cheeks burned with shame. She couldn't lift her head, feeling every awkward, sympathetic gaze as guests trickled out. Ethan quietly approached her and gave her hand a gentle squeeze, a silent show of support. Christina stood near the door, automatically saying farewell to guests, her face frozen in a tense smile that never touched her eyes. Michael nodded curtly, his face dark, clearly lost in thought. Within half an hour, the house was quiet again. Only the catering staff remained, quietly clearing dishes in the kitchen, moving with exaggerated care, as if sensing the storm still lingering in the air. "Ethan, go upstairs, please," Michael said in an unfamiliar, firm tone. "I need to talk to Grandma." "But Dad," the boy looked worriedly at his grandmother. "It's all right, sweetheart," Eleonora said, trying to smile. "Go on. We really do need to talk." Once Ethan had reluctantly gone upstairs, Michael turned to his wife. "Now explain to me, what was that?" Christina, silent until now, suddenly exploded. "Explain what? Your mother was spying on us, digging through your documents, and instead of backing me up, you humiliate me in front of everyone." "Humiliate you?" Michael shook his head in disbelief. "You publicly called my mother a burden, and I'm the one who humiliated you?" Eleonora sat motionless in her chair, afraid to speak. She had never seen her son so furious. "She's manipulating you!" Christina was nearly shouting now. "She's always turning you against me. Ever since she moved in, all you think about is her." "Because she's my mother, Christina, and she's sick." "So what now? I have to put up with her criticism, her constant interference in our lives?" Christina's eyes filled with tears. "She's hated me from day one, never accepted me, and now she's inventing conspiracies." Eleonora couldn't take it anymore. "I'm not inventing anything, Christina. I did see those documents. I did hear you talk about revenge." "You see?" Christina turned to Michael, pointing at Eleonora. "She's still rambling. What revenge? What nonsense is this?" Michael looked at his mother. "Mom, what exactly did you hear?" Eleonora gathered her strength. "I heard Christina talking to a man, someone named Mr. Gray," Eleonora said steadily. "They mentioned someone called Robert Davidson and said that after your birthday, it would be time to settle things for good. Something about the company and a legacy." Christina's face turned as white as a sheet. That's ridiculous," she stammered. "What Mr. Gray? What Davidson? She's making it all up." But Michael suddenly stiffened. "Davidson? Are you sure, Mom?" "Absolutely," Eleonora nodded. "They talked about a father, prison, and suicide. I didn't understand all of it, but it sounded ominous." Michael slowly turned to his wife. "Robert Davidson was my father's business partner, the one who nearly bankrupted the firm. What does he have to do with you, Christina?" Christina started pacing like a trapped animal. "Nothing. She's lying. She's doing this to tear us apart." "The documents I saw," Eleonora continued quietly, "they had your signature, Michael, but it looked strange, like someone had tried to imitate your handwriting." "Enough," Christina shouted. "I won't listen to this anymore. She hates me. Can't you see that? She's been trying to ruin us since the day we got married." Michael looked shaken, but something had shifted in his expression. Doubt, and something harder. Suspicion. He walked over to his briefcase and opened it. "Where are the documents you mentioned, Mom?" Eleonora shook her head, flustered. "I don't know. Christina took them when she caught me." "Of course!" Christina flung her hands in the air. "The papers have mysteriously vanished. How convenient." "Actually," Michael said as he slowly took out his phone, I can check. All documents are backed up digitally. As he scrolled through the files, his face grew darker. Christina, he said in a dangerously quiet voice, there is a contract here, with an offshore firm, with my signature, a signature I never gave. Christina stepped back, her mask beginning to slip. It's a mistake. Must be a different file. With my company's logo? With my forged signature? Michael finally raised his voice. Who is this Gray? And what does Davidson have to do with him? Eleonora had never seen her son yell. Even during the worst teenage years, he had always kept his temper, but now he was furious. Were you going to hand over part of my company to them? Why? What the hell is going on? Suddenly, Christina changed. The hysteria stopped. The tears vanished. She straightened, her expression cold and flat. It doesn't matter. It's over. The plan failed. With that, she grabbed her handbag and coat and headed for the door. Where are you going? Michael called after her. We're not finished. On the contrary, we are, Christina said, pausing at the doorway, her face twisted with bitterness. You want the truth? Ask your precious mother about your father's business. Ask what really happened with Davidson. The door slammed shut. A moment later, the engine roared and she was gone. Michael and Eleonora sat in the living room, stunned and shaken. At last, Michael sank into the chair across from his mother. Mom, he said wearily, why didn't you tell me? All this time, was Christina really treating you the way she said tonight? Eleonora struggled to find words. A year of humiliations, small cruelties, and cold disdain. All while she kept silent to protect her son, afraid he wouldn't believe her. She made life very hard for me, Eleonora said at last. What you saw was just a mask. When you left, everything changed. She hid my pills, gave me leftovers, kept me from seeing Ethan. Every day she reminded me I didn't belong here. Michael's face grew darker with every word. Why didn't you say something? He asked, his voice tight with pain. I would have never let that happen. I was afraid, Eleonora answered simply. Afraid you wouldn't believe me, that you'd take her side. You loved her so much. You looked so happy. I didn't want to destroy that. Michael buried his face in his hands. God, Mom, I should have seen it. I should have noticed what was happening in my own house. You were working so hard. Eleonora gently touched his shoulder. And Christina knew how to play the perfect wife when you were around. It ends now, Michael said, sitting upright, his expression hardening. I swear, no one will ever treat you like that again, and I'll find out exactly what she was trying to do to my company. They talked for a long time that night. Eleonora told him everything, the daily humiliations, the hidden walker, the cold meals. Michael listened, his face hardening with every detail. When she finished, he looked both devastated and determined. I was blind, he said, but not anymore. Near midnight, as Eleonora was getting ready for bed, Michael's phone rang. She heard him answer sharply, then fall silent as he moved into his office. Not wanting to eavesdrop, she headed for her room, but the door to the office was ajar, and bits of the conversation drifted out. Morrison, yes, the photos. The phrases were fragmented, unclear. Eleonora slowed, listening. They followed her, suspected she... Michael's voice was tense, focused. Who was Morrison? Who had been followed? Eleonora couldn't make sense of the conversation, but something told her it was connected to Christina. Evidence. Meetings with... Again, muffled phrases. Then a pause, as Michael listened. Eleonora was nearly at her room when one name rang out, loud and clear. Davidson! Michael exclaimed. That can't be. Footsteps followed. Eleonora quickly slipped into her room and shut the door. Her heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and rising dread. Whoever Morrison was, whatever he had revealed, it clearly had everything to do with Christina's sudden departure and her secret double life. Eleonora woke to sunlight filtering through the curtains. Her head felt heavy after a sleepless night filled with anxious thoughts and attempts to make sense of the fragments of conversation she had overheard. The events of the previous evening felt like a nightmare. Public humiliation, her son's unexpected defense, Christina's sudden departure. Slowly making her way down to the dining room with the help of her walker, she found Michael at the table, surrounded by his laptop and a stack of documents. Ethan sat beside him, absent-mindedly poking at his cereal, unusually quiet for such an energetic 5-year-old. "Good morning," Eleonora said, attempting a smile, though it came out strained. "Grandma!" Ethan looked up at her with dull, tired eyes. "Is Mom coming back?" Eleonora looked helplessly at her son. Michael set aside the papers and closed his laptop. "Mom, we need to talk," he said seriously. "Ethan, why don't you go pack your swim things? Practice is in an hour." When the boy reluctantly left the room, Michael gestured for his mother to sit beside him. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. "It's about Christina." "I heard part of your conversation last night," Eleonora admitted. "Something about photos. Who is Morrison?" Michael sighed deeply. "He's a private investigator. I hired him 3 months ago." Eleonora raised her eyebrows in surprise. 3 months? But why? Problems started popping up in the company. Michael rubbed his tired eyes. Strange financial transactions, attempts to access confidential files, and Christina began acting differently. Mysterious phone calls, unexplained absences. At first, I thought she was having an affair. Eleonora reached out and gently touched his hand. "Oh, Michael." "I needed to know the truth before confronting her," he continued. "So, I hired Morrison, the best PI in the city, and what he found..." Michael opened a folder and pulled out several photographs. Eleonora gasped. In them, Christina appeared in various places across the city, meeting with different men. But these weren't romantic encounters. They looked strictly businesslike. Cafes, office buildings, one even outside a bank. "They're not lovers," Michael said, as if reading her mind. "They're business contacts. At least 3 of them are corporate lawyers. And this one," he pointed to an older man with sharp features in an expensive suit, "is the Mr. Gray you mentioned." "Who is he?" Eleonora asked, squinting at the cold, calculating expression on the man's face. "Some kind of lawyer," Michael replied. "Morrison has info on him, but he's still digging." He pulled out another document. Eleonora looked at the paper and felt a chill in her chest. "Anna Lewinsky?" she whispered, reading the name. "Those people who came looking for Anna?" "Yes," Michael nodded. "Christina's real name is Anna Lewinsky. According to the documents Morrison found, she changed it 7 years ago, 2 years before we met." Eleonora was stunned. But why? Why hide her real identity? Michael spread more documents on the table. "Look, this is her real birth certificate. And this is a completely fake biography. The college she claimed to graduate from, she was never enrolled. Her supposed job in New York, no one there has heard of her. The family from Boston, made up. Even the people in the photos she showed us as her parents, not her family at all." "My God," Eleonora whispered, the room spinning slightly. "Then who is she, really?" "Whoever she is," Michael said bitterly, "she didn't marry me out of love. Morrison found proof that she planned this for years. Studied me, my preferences, even altered her appearance to match the type of woman I liked. Our accidental meeting? It was staged, all of it, a carefully calculated operation." Eleonora remembered how quickly Christina had charmed Michael, how perfectly she seemed to match him in every way, almost too perfectly. In a way, it was all by design. But why? What was she after? "Looks like she wanted access to my company." Michael showed her another document. "This is a copy of the contract I supposedly signed, but I never did. It transfers controlling shares to an offshore firm connected to Mr. Gray. The signature on it is forged." Eleonora pressed her hand to her mouth. "God." And she waited 5 years for this? Pretending to love you all that time? And had a child as part of the plan? Michael added bitterly. How can someone be so cold? They sat in silence, stunned by the scope of the betrayal. At last, Eleonora asked, "What happens now? Are you going to find Christina?" "Morrison's tracking her already," Michael replied. "But I don't know what I'll do if I find her. I can't forgive 5 years of lies. But more than that, I don't understand why. Why me? What was the real motive?" "And what about Ethan?" Eleonora asked softly. "What will you tell him?" Michael shook his head. "Nothing. Not yet. He's too young to understand any of this." The days dragged on, heavy with tension. Christina didn't return or call. Michael hired a temporary nanny to care for Ethan while he worked. Eleonora tried to spend more time with her grandson, but the boy clearly blamed her for his mother's disappearance. "It's your fault she left," he said one evening when she came to say goodnight. "You told Dad bad things about her." "Ethan, I didn't—" Eleonora began, but the boy turned his back to her. "I want Mommy to come back. You go away." Those words hurt more than all of Christina's insults. Eleonora felt her heart squeeze with pain, but how could she explain such a tangled truth to a 5-year-old? Michael was hardly ever home, buried in work, reviewing every company document, trying to assess the potential damage. He came back late, silent and worn down. On the 4th day after Christina's disappearance, Ethan broke down at dinner. "Why won't she call? Doesn't she love me anymore?" Eleonora looked at her son helplessly, unsure what to say. Michael set down his fork and pulled the boy into his arms. "Of course she loves you, Ethan, very much. Right now things are just complicated. Sometimes grown-ups fight and need space to think." "But she's coming back?" Ethan sobbed. "Of course." Michael stroked his son's hair, casting a doubtful glance at his mother. "She'll come back." After dinner, once Ethan had gone upstairs, Michael admitted, "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, giving him hope. Morrison says Christina withdrew a large sum from her account and bought a plane ticket, but she hasn't used it yet." "Maybe she wants to keep you worried," Eleonora suggested. "Still, 5 years of marriage can't be all fake, not with a child." Michael shrugged. "I don't know what to believe anymore." That night, Eleonora couldn't sleep. Thoughts of Christina, or Anna, wouldn't leave her mind. Who was she really? What secrets lay beneath the surface of her forged biography? And most of all, why had she hated Eleonora so deeply? The cruelty had started long before Eleonora overheard anything suspicious. Around 2 a.m., just as sleep was finally beginning to take hold, a faint rustling sound somewhere in the house made her alert. At first, she thought it was Michael still awake, but then she remembered. He had left earlier for a meeting in a nearby town and wasn't due back until midday. Eleonora's heart began to race. Could it be Ethan? Or a burglar? Carefully getting out of bed, she took her walker and slowly made her way to the door. Stepping into the hallway, she listened. The sound was coming from Michael's office downstairs. Should I call the police? She wondered. But what if it's Ethan? I'd only scare him. Slowly, trying not to make a sound, she began descending the stairs. Each step felt like a challenge. One wrong move, and the walker would rattle loudly, giving her away. Once she reached the ground floor, Eleonora saw a strip of light beneath the office door. Definitely not Ethan. He was afraid of the dark and always turned on every lamp. Her heart pounded so loudly it seemed to echo in her ears. As she approached the door, she heard the rustle of papers and soft muttering. A woman's voice. Carefully, trying not to creak the floorboards, Eleonora pushed the office door open. Standing by the desk, frantically rifling through documents in the drawers, was Christina. Disheveled, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but unmistakably her. At the sound of the door, Christina spun around. Their eyes met. "You," Christina breathed. In her eyes, there was a flicker of fear that quickly turned into cold resolve. a heavy silence fell over the room. Eleanor and Christina stared at each other, the elderly woman leaning on her walker and the younger one caught red-handed in front of an open desk drawer. On the floor beside, Christina sat a small travel bag. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor asked at last, trying to keep her voice calm despite the rapid beating of her heart. Christina straightened up, glancing around like a cornered animal looking for an escape. Then her shoulders sagged, as if she had made some decision. "The documents," she said tiredly. "I needed certain documents." "The ones with Michael's forged signature?" Eleanor stepped cautiously into the room, keeping a firm grip on her walker. "Or something else?" Christina's eyes narrowed. "So he told you. Of course he did." "He hired a private investigator," Eleanor said softly. "We know you're not who you said you were, Anna." At the sound of her real name, Christina flinched. Then she suddenly laughed, a bitter, broken laugh of someone who had nothing left to lose. "You know, I almost did it." She snapped the drawer shut. "Just a little longer and it would have been over. 5 years of work. But I hesitated too long, waited too long." "5 years," Eleanor echoed. "You didn't marry Michael for love." It wasn't a question, but Christina answered anyway. "It was calculated, yes, though love—" She hesitated. Love turned out to be an unexpected complication. In the dim light of the desk lamp, Christina's face looked gaunt, older than her years. Eleanor saw the shadows under her eyes, the tightness in her lips. Not the poised, elegant woman she'd known for years, but a weary soul burdened with too many secrets. "Why?" Eleanor asked simply. "Why all the lies?" "Why?" Christina repeated with a bitter smile. "For revenge, of course, on your family, for what you did to my father." Eleanor leaned against the doorframe, suddenly weak in the knees. "Your father? Who was he?" "Robert Davidson." The name landed like a blow. "You know that name, don't you?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "James's partner? But what—" "Your husband ruined his life," Christina said, her voice laced with old pain. "Framed him for embezzlement he didn't commit. Fabricated evidence, lied under oath. My father went to prison for 5 years. He lost everything: money, reputation, family." Eleanor shook her head. "No, that's not true. James would never—" "Deny it to the end, just like all you Nortons." Christina pulled a folded sheet of paper from her pocket. "Do you know what happened after my father got out of prison? No one would hire him. Old friends turned their backs. My mother had left him long before, taking me with her. He tried to start over, but that criminal label never washed off." Her voice trembled. "A year later, he killed himself, hanged himself in a cheap apartment. I was 16 when I found him." Eleanor brought a trembling hand to her mouth. "God, I'm so sorry, Christina. But James, he would never—" "You didn't know your husband," Christina cut her off sharply. "He was a good actor. You all are." She leaned heavily on the desk, as if the weight of her words was finally pulling her down. "After my father died, I swore I'd get revenge. I spent years researching the Norton family, planning, waiting for the right moment. And when I saw James had passed and his son inherited the company, the plan became clear." "You married Michael to destroy him," Eleanor whispered, "just like you believe your father's life was destroyed." "Exactly," Christina nodded. "I changed my appearance, built a new identity, learned what he liked, what he was interested in. I orchestrated a chance encounter. He fell for me just as I expected. Then came the marriage, the child, the perfect life I was meant to tear down at the right time." "And then what?" Eleanor asked. "What would have happened after?" Christina shrugged. "Forge his signature on the contracts, transfer company assets to offshore accounts, divorce him, take half of what remained, plus Ethan, leave him with nothing, like my father." Eleanor leaned against the wall, feeling lightheaded. 5 years of marriage, built on lies, cold calculation, and a long-burning desire for vengeance. "But something went wrong," she said quietly. You couldn't go through with it." Christina's eyes filled with tears, an expression Eleonora had never seen on her. "I didn't plan for one thing," Christina admitted, "that in 5 years I'd grow attached, that I'd love. Ethan, he's my son, you understand? My real son, not part of any plan. I raised him, cared for him when he was sick, helped him learn to read." She drew a shaky breath. "And then Michael. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear I never meant to feel anything real for him. But he wasn't like his father. He's kind, honest, patient. And I got lost." "So that's why you kept delaying the final step," Eleonora guessed. "Yes," Christina nodded. "Everything was ready a month ago, but I kept making excuses, postponing it. And then you started to suspect something, and I panicked. I became cruel to you, tried to turn Michael against you, so he wouldn't believe you if you said anything." Eleonora suddenly understood. "So that's why you treated me like that. Not because I was in the way, but because you were the wife of the man who destroyed my father," Christina said, her voice going cold again. "And because I was afraid you'd uncover the truth, which is exactly what you did." Eleonora's heart skipped a beat. Could it be Ethan? Or a burglar? Carefully, she got out of bed, took her walker, and made her way to the door. In the hallway, she paused and listened. The noise was coming from Michael's office downstairs. "Should I call the police?" she thought. "But what if it's Ethan? I'd only frighten him." Moving slowly and silently, she descended the stairs. Each step was a challenge. One wrong move and the walker would clatter, revealing her presence. At the bottom of the stairs, she saw light under the office door. It couldn't be Ethan. He was afraid of the dark and always turned on every light. Her heart pounded so loud, she was sure it echoed in the hallway. As she approached, she heard the rustle of papers and a soft murmur. A woman's voice. Carefully, avoiding the creaking floorboards, Eleonora pushed the door open. There, by the desk, frantically rummaging through drawers, stood Christina, disheveled, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but unmistakably herself. At the sound of the door, she turned sharply, and their eyes locked. "You?" Christina breathed. Fear flashed in her eyes, quickly replaced by cold determination. A tense silence fell. Eleonora and Christina stared at each other, the elderly woman gripping her walker, the younger one caught off guard in front of an open drawer. A small travel bag sat on the floor beside Christina. "What are you doing here?" Eleonora asked at last, trying to sound calm, though her heart pounded in her chest. Christina straightened, looking around like a trapped animal. Then her shoulders slumped as if she had reached a decision. "The documents," she said wearily. "I came for a few final documents that could tie me to all this." Suddenly, she sank to her knees before Eleonora, a gesture devoid of pride. "Please," she said, "don't tell Ethan the truth. Let him remember me as a mother who loved him, not a vengeful liar, because I do love him. That part wasn't a lie." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "And Michael, don't tell him the full truth about his father. Let him keep that memory, please." Eleonora looked down at the woman before her, broken, defeated, and yet still trying to protect those she had unintentionally come to love. And strangely, a flicker of compassion stirred in her heart. "Your story about your father, is it true?" "Every word," Christina nodded. "I have proof. But I don't want to destroy Michael's image of his father. That was my revenge. I can't hurt him that way. Not anymore." Eleonora stood in painful hesitation. Should she tell her son? Call the police? Let Christina go? "I'll never come back. I'll never trouble you again," Christina continued. "Let Michael believe I betrayed him for money, not revenge. It'll be easier that way." Her voice held such desperation, such raw honesty, that Eleonora knew she was seeing the real Christina, or rather, Anna. The woman behind the mask, so tangled in her own lies, she could no longer tell where they ended, and she began. "I'll think about it," Eleonora said quietly. "I can't promise anything, but I'll think." Christina stood wiping away tears. That's all I ask." She picked up her bag and swept a few papers from the desk into it. "One thing I know for sure," she said, walking to the door. "You didn't deserve how I treated you. That wasn't your fault. I'm sorry, if you can forgive me." Then she disappeared into the dark hallway. A few seconds later, Eleonora heard the quiet click of the front door and the sound of an engine starting. She was alone in the office, shaken to her core. Christina's words about James echoed in her mind. Could her husband really have done something so awful, falsified evidence, sent an innocent man to prison? Eleonora slowly sank into Michael's chair, weakness flooding her body. In front of her lay an unbearable decision. Should she protect her son from the truth about his father, or destroy the memory of the man he idolized? What if Christina was telling the truth? What if the evidence still existed? Her thoughts turned to the old trunk in the attic, filled with documents, letters, and journals James had left behind. She had never been able to bring herself to go through it after his death. It was too painful, but now she had to know the truth, no matter how bitter. Eleonora spent several sleepless nights combing through James's old papers in the attic trunk. What she found confirmed Christina's story: personal letters, draft accusations with handwritten adjustments, and a forensic report with 2 versions. There was no longer any doubt. Her husband had fabricated evidence against his business partner. Every line was a blow to her heart. The man she had spent 30 years with, whom she believed to be honest and principled, had committed an unforgivable act. And worse still, she now had to decide whether to tell Michael. The decision came on Friday morning when Michael announced over breakfast, "I'm meeting with a lawyer today. I'm filing for divorce." Ethan dropped his fork. "No, Dad, don't. Mom will come back. I know she will." "Ethan," Michael said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder, "sometimes adults decide they shouldn't stay together. But that doesn't mean we stop loving you." "I hate you," Ethan shouted, leaping from his chair. "You're making Mom leave, and Grandma's helping you." He ran out of the kitchen, and a moment later, his bedroom door slammed upstairs. "I'm sorry, Mom," Michael sighed. "He needs time." Eleonora stared at her son in silence. She had to tell him the truth. But how could she explain that his father had committed a crime that destroyed another man's life, and that the woman he believed had betrayed him for money had actually spent 5 years planning revenge? "Michael, there's something I need to show you," she began, but was interrupted by the sharp ring of the doorbell. "Who could that be this early?" Michael frowned and went to answer it. Eleonora heard his surprised voice, then a few muffled words: Michael's, a woman's, and an unfamiliar man's. Moments later, Christina entered the kitchen, followed by a tall man in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase. Michael came in behind them, visibly pale. "Good morning, Eleonora," Christina greeted her coldly. There was no trace of the broken woman Eleonora had seen the night before. Before her stood the composed, calculating figure with an icy stare. "Allow me to introduce my attorney, Mr. Fisher." She nodded to her companion. "We're here to discuss the terms of my divorce from Michael." "Terms?" Michael echoed. "After disappearing without a word? After everything you've done?" "I needed time to collect my thoughts," Christina countered. "That doesn't mean I'm forfeiting my legal rights." The lawyer pulled documents from his briefcase. "My client is seeking an equal division of marital assets, including 50% of Norton Electronics, as well as full custody of the child." "What?" Michael's face turned red. 50% of my company? Are you insane? It's a family business, founded by my father long before we married." "We are open to negotiations," the lawyer replied calmly. "But my client has grounds to claim a substantial portion of the business, given her knowledge of certain internal matters." "What internal matters?" Michael growled. Christina smiled, cold and calculating. "I have proof of illegal dealings in your company, Michael. Documents on questionable transactions, tax evasion, bribery of officials. I imagine the IRS and the SEC would be very interested." Michael went pale. "That's a lie. Everything in my company is above board." Yours, perhaps, Christina said, emphasizing the word. But your father's company? When you inherited the business, you inherited all his sins too, Michael. Eleonora suddenly understood what documents Christina was referring to, not current ones, but the old papers proving James's misconduct, the very ones she had found in the attic trunk, and had yet to show her son. "Where did you get those documents?" Michael demanded. "That doesn't matter," the lawyer interrupted. "What matters is that the documents exist and can be used in court, or turned over to the appropriate authorities if we fail to reach an agreement." Michael clenched his fists. "This is blackmail, and I won't give in to it." "Call it what you want," Christina shrugged. "But think about Ethan, your reputation, the future of the company. Is all that worth the risk?" At that moment, rapid footsteps echoed on the stairs, and Ethan burst into the kitchen. Seeing his mother, he cried out and ran to her. "Mom, you're back." Christina hugged her son, and Eleonora noticed how, for a fleeting moment, the mask of coldness slipped from her face, replaced by genuine tenderness. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm here," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. Then she looked at Michael. "See, he wants to be with me." "You're using your own son," Michael said through gritted teeth. "Ethan," Eleonora said gently, "why don't you go upstairs for a little while? We need to talk about grown-up matters." "No!" the boy shouted, clinging tighter to his mother. "I'm not going. You just want to send Mom away again." "No one's sending anyone away," the lawyer said in a calm, almost rehearsed tone. "We're just discussing adult issues." Michael steadied himself. "Ethan, please, give us a few minutes. Then you can spend as much time with Mom as you want." Reluctantly, the boy obeyed, casting a resentful look at his father and grandmother before leaving the room. Once he was gone, Christina turned to Michael again. "My terms are simple. Half the company, the house stays with Ethan and me, and I get full custody, with you having regular visitation. In return, I promise the incriminating documents remain confidential." Michael stared at her with a mix of fury and disbelief. "Why, Christina? Why all this? If it was money you wanted, I'd have given you anything. Why the lies, the double life?" Christina closed her eyes briefly, and Eleonora could see how hard it was for her to maintain the facade. "Money, of course," she finally said. "Isn't that obvious? I've waited years for the right moment." "I don't believe you," Michael said softly. "There's something more." A heavy silence fell. Eleonora realized the moment had come. "Michael, I need to speak with you, alone, right now." Christina shot her a sharp, wary look. "We don't have time for private conversations," the lawyer protested. "My client's terms—" "Wait here," Michael interrupted, nodding to his mother. "We'll be back shortly." He led Eleonora into the living room and closed the door behind them. "What is it, Mom? Do you know something?" Eleonora took a deep breath and pulled a folded piece of paper from the pocket of her robe. "I found this among your father's things, and not just this." Michael unfolded the document. It was a letter from James to his attorney, giving instructions on how to adjust company financial reports so the blame for embezzlement would fall on Davidson. "What? What is this?" Michael murmured, his face draining of color. "The truth about your father," Eleonora said quietly. "James really did fabricate the evidence. Robert Davidson was innocent." "No," Michael shook his head. "This must be fake. Dad would never—" "He would." Eleonora's eyes filled with tears. "I verified it. There are other documents in the attic trunk. Drafts with your father's handwritten notes, altered reports. Davidson really was innocent." Michael collapsed into a chair, holding the letter in shaking hands. But why? Why would Dad frame his partner? "The company was on the brink of collapse," Eleonora explained. "In one letter, James said it was the only way to save the business and ensure a future for us, for you. He panicked and made a terrible decision." Michael looked up at her, stunned. "So I've been living on money stolen by my father my entire life? The company built on a lie?" Eleonora sat beside him and took his hand. "You are not responsible for your father's sins, Michael. What James did was his burden, but now that we know the truth, now I have to make it right," Michael finished, and determination lit his eyes. "But what does this have to do with Christina? Why is she using these documents against me?" Eleonora hesitated only a moment. He deserved to know. "Because Robert Davidson is her father," she said quietly. "Christina's real name is Anna Lewinsky. She's Davidson's daughter. She married you to take revenge on the family that ruined his life." Michael covered his face with his hands. "God, 5 years, all this time, even Ethan." "I think she truly loves Ethan," Eleonora said gently, "and maybe even you. Otherwise, she would have carried out her revenge long ago." Michael stood, his face set with resolve. "I need to speak with her, alone. No lawyers, no threats." They returned to the kitchen. Christina was tapping her fingers nervously on the table while her lawyer reviewed a stack of papers. "Mr. Fisher," Michael said, "I'd like to speak with my wife in private." "I wouldn't advise," the lawyer began, but Christina interrupted. "It's fine. We can talk." As Eleonora left the kitchen with the lawyer, she didn't go far. She leaned quietly against the hallway wall, listening to the muffled conversation behind the door. The voices rose and fell. At one point, she heard Christina nearly shout, "You have no idea what it's like?" Michael responded quietly. His words were inaudible. The lawyer glanced at his watch with irritation, occasionally shooting suspicious looks at Eleonora, but she paid him no mind. Her thoughts were with whatever was unfolding behind the closed door. Finally, it opened. Michael stepped out first, his face pale and tight with emotion. Christina followed, her eyes red, but her expression cold and resolved. "Roger," she said to the lawyer, "we're leaving." "Did you reach an agreement?" he asked, glancing suspiciously at Michael. "No," Christina replied flatly, "but I need time to consider new information." Michael took a step toward her. "Christina, think about Ethan. We can—" "Not now," she interrupted, stepping away from his hand. "I need time." At that moment, footsteps sounded from upstairs and Ethan appeared on the staircase. "Mom?" he called uncertainly. "You're not leaving again, are you?" Christina's expression softened, and Eleonora noticed how her hands trembled. She was barely holding back her emotions. "I have to go away for a little while, sweetheart," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I'll come back, I promise, and we'll talk about everything." "When?" the boy demanded, descending the stairs. Christina cast a quick glance at Michael, then back at her son. "Soon. I just need time to think about some grown-up things." Ethan ran to her and threw his arms around her. "I love you, Mom. Please don't leave us." Eleonora saw Christina's lips tremble as she pressed her face to the top of her son's head, breathing in his scent. There was so much genuine love in that gesture that any doubt vanished. However calculating Christina had been in her revenge, her love for her son was real. "I love you too," she whispered, slowly pulling away. "More than anything in the world." She gave Michael one final look, filled with anger, pain, and something else, indefinable, then quickly walked out the front door. Her lawyer followed, clutching his briefcase to his chest. Michael closed the door behind them and leaned against it, eyes shut. He looked drained. "Dad?" Ethan called softly. "It's gonna be okay, buddy," Michael forced a smile. "Mom just needs some time to think. Grown-ups do that sometimes." "Is she mad at you?" "Yes," Michael said honestly. "But not just at me. It's complicated." Ethan frowned. "Is it because of Grandpa? I heard you talking about him." Michael looked uneasily at Eleonora. "Ethan," she said gently, "why don't you go watch that new movie you've been wanting to see? Your dad and I need to talk a little." The boy nodded reluctantly and headed upstairs. Once his footsteps faded, Michael sank heavily into a chair. "She refused the deal," he said, staring blankly ahead. "When I showed her the documents and told her I knew who she was and why she married me, she cried. Then got angry, Said she didn't need my pity or justice, that now that the plan was exposed, she'd just leave. And take Ethan? Eleonora asked quietly. She doesn't know. Michael rubbed his temples. She said she didn't want to hurt him, but she couldn't stay with me either. Said it was all a mistake. 5 years of a mistake. There was such pain in his voice that Eleonora stepped closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. But there were real feelings, Michael. I saw it, in the way she looked at you just now, in the way she said goodbye to Ethan. She loves you both, whether she wants to admit it or not. I feel it too, Michael admitted, and that's the hardest part. Knowing it all started as a lie, as revenge, but somewhere along the way it became real. And now, there's no way forward, no way back. How can I ever trust her again? And how can I let go, knowing she's part of our lives, our family? Eleonora sat beside her son and took his hand. And what did you tell her about the company? About what you plan to do with your father's legacy? I told her I want to make things right. Michael looked at his mother. The company should have belonged to both of them, Dad and Davidson. Now it should belong to his daughter, too, whether or not she remains my wife. And how did she respond? Said she didn't want my charity? Michael gave a bitter laugh. That she didn't want anything from the Nortons. Said she wished she'd never met me. Eleonora shook her head. She's just confused and angry. Her plan failed, but at the same time, it succeeded. The truth came out. It just didn't unfold the way she expected. They sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in thought. What are you going to do, Michael? Eleonora finally asked. He looked up, eyes full of resolve. Fix what my father broke. No matter what happens to my marriage, I built my life, my business on a foundation of lies and injustice. It's time to change that. And Christina? I don't know, Michael admitted. I can't force her to stay, can't make her forgive, but I'll fight for our marriage, for our family, because despite all the lies, I still... He didn't finish the sentence, but Eleonora didn't need him to. Her son still loved the woman who came to destroy his life, but had become part of it instead. We'll get through this, she said, squeezing his hand. Together. It's time our family stopped living in lies. Michael nodded, a flicker of determination returning to his eyes. You're right. It's time to make things right. All of it. His mistakes and mine. The next morning, after Michael had left for work and Ethan was off to school, the doorbell rang. Moving slowly with her walker, Eleonora opened the door. Standing on the doorstep was Christina's lawyer, Mr. Fisher. Mrs. Norton, he said with a polite nod. Sorry for the unexpected visit. May I speak with you privately? Eleonora hesitated for only a moment. What could Christina's lawyer want from her now? More threats? New demands? Come in, she said, stepping aside. Would you like some coffee? I'd appreciate that, Fisher replied, following her into the kitchen. When they sat at the table with their cups, the lawyer unexpectedly removed his thin-rimmed glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Without them, he looked less formal, more human. Mrs. Norton, I'm not here as Mrs. Norton's, Miss Lewinsky's, attorney today, he began. I've come as someone who knew her father. Eleonora raised her eyebrows in surprise. You knew Robert Davidson? Yes, Fisher nodded. I was a junior associate at the law firm that represented him during that fateful case, fresh out of law school, but I saw firsthand how the life of an honest man was ruined by fabricated evidence. My husband, Eleonora began, but Fisher raised a hand. I'm not here to accuse your late husband, though, believe me, there was a time I hated him, just like Anna did. But now, he shook his head. Now I see how revenge is destroying her. She doesn't sleep, barely eats, spends her days buried in documents, plotting her next move against your son. I thought you supported her in that, Eleonora said cautiously. Professionally, yes, Fisher admitted. As her lawyer, it's my job to defend her interests, but as someone who knew Robert, he sipped his coffee. Robert Davidson was a kind, principled man. He wouldn't have approved of what his daughter is doing. That's not the kind of justice he believed in. Eleonora watched him closely, trying to discern his true intentions. So what are you suggesting? A meeting, Fisher replied simply. All parties, on neutral ground, no threats, no legal posturing, just an honest conversation about how to make things right. Why come to me and not to Michael? Fisher gave a wry smile. Your son is unlikely to listen to me, Fisher said. He sees me as part of his wife's scheme to destroy the company. But you... He looked Eleonora directly in the eyes. You can influence him, and I believe you want this story to end without more suffering, especially for your grandson. At the mention of Ethan, Eleonora instinctively tightened her grip on her cup. He misses his mother terribly, and she misses him, Fisher nodded, but pride and pain won't let her make the first move. Eleonora fell silent. Fisher's plan sounded reasonable, but how can I be sure this isn't just another trap, another way to lure Michael into something? You can't, Fisher admitted honestly, but I give you my word, as someone who respected Robert Davidson, I want a fair resolution, not the destruction of another family. Too many lives have already been broken because of what your husband did. It's time to stop the cycle of pain. Something in his words, in his tired but sincere expression, convinced Eleonora. I'll speak to Michael, she nodded at last. But I can't promise he'll agree. That's all I ask. Fisher slid his glasses back on, instantly returning to his professional composure. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready to discuss the meeting. Just as Fisher had predicted, Michael reacted to the idea with skepticism. It could be a trap, he said grimly when Eleonora told him about the lawyer's visit. Another way for Christina to get what she wants. Maybe, Eleonora admitted, but what if it's a real chance to set things right? Think of Ethan, Michael. He shouldn't suffer for mistakes made long before he was born. Michael was silent for a long time, staring at a photo of his son on the mantel. Fine, he said finally, but on my terms. The meeting will be in a public place, and I'll bring my lawyer. Eleonora smiled. I'll call Mr. Fisher. The restaurant Blue Cove, on the edge of town, was chosen deliberately. Neutral territory, a private room where an important conversation wouldn't be disturbed. Eleonora arrived first, carefully climbing the steps with her walker. The host led her to the reserved room. Soon, Michael arrived with his attorney, a short, stocky man with a sharp, attentive gaze. Fisher followed with another guest, an elderly woman with kind eyes, introduced as a professional mediator. Christina came last. She looked composed but worn, dark circles under her eyes, sharper features. When she saw Michael, she froze at the doorway for a moment, as if considering turning back, but Fisher gently laid a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Thank you all for coming, the mediator began once they were seated at the round table. Before we begin, I want to establish a few rules. No accusations, no interruptions. Everyone speaks in turn. Our goal here is not to win, but to find a resolution that everyone can live with. Eleonora nervously clutched a handkerchief. She hadn't planned to speak first, but suddenly realized she had to, starting with an honest confession, with the truth. If I may, she said quietly. When everyone turned to her, she took a deep breath. First of all, I want to publicly acknowledge the wrongdoing of my late husband, James Norton, against Robert Davidson. I didn't know at the time, but that's no excuse. James fabricated evidence that sent an innocent man to prison and ruined his life. Christina stared at her with wide eyes, clearly not expecting such a direct admission. I can't undo what my husband did, Eleonora continued, meeting Christina's gaze. But I can ask forgiveness on behalf of the Norton family, and I hope today we can find a way to at least begin to heal the damage that was done. Silence fell. Then Michael spoke. I second my mother's words. What my father did is unforgivable. I built my career, my company, on a foundation of lies and injustice. And though I didn't know it until recently, it's now my responsibility to make it right. He opened a folder from his briefcase. I've prepared a proposal. 30% of Norton Electronics shares will be transferred to the Robert Davidson Foundation. The foundation will fund legal aid for the wrongfully convicted and business ethics education programs. Control of the foundation will rest with Robert Davidson's heirs, meaning you, Christina. Christina stared at the folder as if it were something unreal. You're acknowledging it? Just like that? Her voice trembled. After everything I've done? Not just like that, Michael shook his head. Believe me, this is the hardest decision I've ever made, but it's the right one. What my father did was wrong. What you did was wrong too, but we can end this cycle of pain and injustice. Fisher leaned toward Christina. This is more than we could ever get in court, Anna, and it's the honest acknowledgement you always wanted. Christina was silent, eyes fixed on the table. Then she looked up at Eleonora. All these years, she began, her voice breaking. All these years I hated you, your family, your lifestyle. I imagined you all knew and were enjoying success built on my father's suffering. I understand, Eleonora said gently. No, you don't. Christina shook her head. I was so focused on revenge that I became a monster, especially to you. I humiliated you, tormented you, made your life unbearable, and all because of something you didn't even know about. To everyone's surprise, tears welled up in Christina's eyes. I'm sorry for everything I did. You didn't deserve any of it. Eleonora reached across the table and took Christina's hand in hers. And I'm sorry, child, for everything my husband did. The mediator smiled gently. Sensing the ice was finally breaking, she steered the discussion toward practical matters, the legal transfer of shares, the foundation's governance structure. But the most difficult subject was Ethan. He's innocent in all of this, Michael said. He shouldn't suffer for the sins of adults. I know, Christina looked lost. But how do we explain to him all of this? That his mother married his father for revenge? We don't, Eleonora said firmly, not until he's old enough to understand. What he needs now are loving parents, both of them. But how can we? Christina looked helplessly at Michael. One day at a time, he replied simply. I'm not saying it'll be easy. I'm not saying I'll trust you right away, or that you can forgive me for my father's sins. But for Ethan's sake, we have to try. Christina looked at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. For Ethan. Once the agreements were finalized and signed, Michael and Christina stepped outside to talk in private. Eleonora watched them through the window. They stood apart, avoiding touch, but talking. It was a first step. You did something beautiful today, Mrs. Norton, Fisher said, stepping up to her. We all did, she replied. Thank you for coming to me. To be honest, I wasn't sure you'd agree. Eleonora looked at the elderly lawyer with a gentle smile. Do you know what it means to be a grandmother, Mr. Fisher? It means wanting happiness for your children and grandchildren more than for yourself. And sometimes that means making difficult choices. Outside, Michael and Christina had finished their conversation and were walking back toward the restaurant. They weren't holding hands, and there was still distance between them, but they were moving in the same direction. For today, that was enough. A month passed since the meeting at Blue Cove. A month of tentative steps toward one another, awkward silences, and strained smiles. The Norton family's life was slowly rebuilding, like a complex mosaic where every piece needed to find its place. Eleonora had moved into the small annex behind the main house, a former guest cottage that Michael hastily converted into a cozy living space. A bedroom, a small sitting room with a kitchenette, and a terrace overlooking the garden. It had its own entrance, giving her independence while keeping her close enough to see her grandson every day. Are you sure you'll be comfortable here? Michael asked while installing a safety railing in the bathroom. We can hire builders to expand it. It's perfect, Eleonora smiled. I don't need a palace. Besides, this gives you and Christina a chance to start over. Michael avoided her gaze. He and Christina had indeed decided to try to save their marriage, but it was a difficult process. After 5 years built on lies and a false identity, they had to get to know each other all over again. Who was the real Anna Lewinsky? And who was Michael Norton without the shadow of his father and a legacy of deception? At night, after putting Ethan to bed, they talked for hours, sometimes calmly, sometimes through tears or raised voices. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully trust you," Michael confessed one night. "Every time you smile, a part of me wonders if it's real or just another mask." "And I don't know if I'll ever stop seeing your father when I look at you," Christina admitted. "Every time I step into the office, I remember what was stolen from mine." They still slept in separate rooms, kept their distance, but they tried. For Ethan, for themselves, for the possibility that something real still existed between them. Ethan was simply happy that his family was together again. He didn't understand the complexity, only that his mother was back, and his grandmother now lived in a tiny hobbit house. His parents weren't yelling anymore, and that was enough for a 5-year-old. "Why don't you and Daddy kiss like before?" he once asked Christina, catching her off guard. "Sometimes grown-ups go through hard times," she explained gently, "but your daddy and I love you very much and will always be here for you." The business was changing too. Michael had initiated a full restructuring of the company, making every process as transparent as possible. 30% of the shares were transferred to the Robert Davidson Foundation, now managed by Christina. It became her new mission. The foundation supported the wrongfully convicted, funded rehabilitation programs for former inmates, and promoted business ethics education. In some ways, it was a more meaningful tribute to her father than revenge. To both women's surprise, Eleonora offered to help. "I taught English literature for 40 years, she said to Christina. "Maybe I can contribute to the educational side, if you're willing, of course." Christina hesitated. Working with a mother-in-law she had once despised and tried to drive out of her home. "It would be helpful," she finally replied. "You have far more teaching experience than I do." Their collaboration began awkwardly, tense smiles, polite phrases, cautious wording. But gradually, they found a rhythm. Eleonora didn't bring up past grievances. Christina stopped addressing her formally. They didn't become friends, but something fragile grew between them, mutual respect. Like the first green shoots of spring, it was delicate but real. One day, Eleonora found Christina alone in the foundation office, weeping over an old photograph. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, retreating toward the door. "No, it's okay." Christina quickly wiped her tears. "Today's the anniversary of my father's death." Eleonora hesitated, then sat beside her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Christina didn't pull away. "Tell me about him," Eleonora said softly. "What was he like?" And Christina told her. How her father taught her to ride a bike. How he read her bedtime stories, doing different voices for each character. How proud he was when she got a perfect score at the Math Olympiad. Simple, loving memories of a father. Not a businessman, not a convict, just a man she missed deeply. "He'd be proud of what you're doing now," Eleonora said when the story ended. "This foundation is the best way to honor him." Christina nodded, still not meeting her eyes. "I lived with so much hatred, I nearly forgot who he really was," she admitted. "It pushed out all the real memories." Something shifted between them that day, not dramatically, not instantly, but the healing had begun. At home, life was also finding a new rhythm. Michael introduced Sunday family dinners. Eleonora would come from her cottage, and they'd cook something special together. At first, the evenings were tense, Michael and Christina choosing their words carefully, avoiding touch, speaking mostly about Ethan and the foundation. But over time, the warmth returned. One evening, Michael accidentally brushed Christina's hand while passing the salt, and she didn't pull away. Another time, he caught her lingering on his smile. "It's strange," he said later that night as they sat in the living room. "It feels like I'm meeting you for the first time." "In a way you are," Christina replied. "Anna Lewinsky was never as honest with you as I am now." Their first kiss after everything was tentative, almost hesitant. They still slept in separate rooms, but the wall between them was thinning. Then came their anniversary, 5 years since their wedding. A date Christina had once marked for revenge, now transformed into a symbol of rebirth. Michael proposed a small family gathering, just Eleonora and a few close friends. Christina agreed, though anxiety flickered in her eyes, another ghost of 12 years of deceit. The evening was warm, filled with gentle laughter. Eleonora, leaning on her walker, brought a homemade pie, which Ethan declared the best in the world. Their friends politely avoided difficult subjects, offering only kind words and congratulations. When the time for toasts came, Michael stood first, raising his glass of champagne. "To 5 years that taught me real love can endure trials we never imagined," he said, smiling gently at Christina, "and to new beginnings." Everyone raised their glasses. Then, unexpectedly, Christina rose. In her hands was a small gift box wrapped in paper. "I'd like to say a few words too," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "about the importance of acknowledging our mistakes and finding the strength to forgive." She turned to Eleonora. "Most of all, I want to address you. For all these years, I caused you so much pain, so much injustice." Christina took a deep breath. "You are not a burden. You never were. You are the foundation of this family, its wisdom and its strength, and I am sorry for every cruel word, every unkind act." She held out the box. "This can't make up for everything, but I hope it will serve as a symbol." Eleonora slowly unwrapped the gift and gasped. Inside was the Norton family heirloom vase, carefully glued back together, its cracks highlighted with delicate gold veins. "The Japanese call it kintsugi," Christina said softly. "The art of making broken things more beautiful, of wearing scars with pride instead of hiding them. Broken can be mended, if there is love and forgiveness." Eleonora gently set the vase on the table and, leaning on her walker, rose to her feet. She took a step toward her daughter-in-law and, to everyone's surprise, embraced her tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for a second chance, for all of us." Deep down, Eleonora knew the path to full reconciliation would be long. Michael and Christina still had many trials ahead to rebuild trust. Old wounds don't heal in a month, and some scars would remain forever. But tonight, she saw a glimmer of hope in the way Michael looked at Christina, in the way Christina held Ethan's hand, in how the family had gathered despite the pain of the past. "My husband destroyed someone else's family," Eleonora thought, gazing at the repaired vase. "But I helped rebuild one, not perfect, marked by scars, but maybe stronger because of them." Truth often brings pain, disappointment, and shattered illusions. But only truth can lay the foundation for real forgiveness, for a new beginning where there is no room for pretense or lies, where every crack becomes a testament not to weakness, but to the strength of those who overcame it.